Hey, how you guys doing? James Humper here with Socialist Productions Movie Reviews. Here to my left is Chris Rose. You guys know Eric. You guys know Dallas. And today's movie topic is... What is it? Topic?
I believe it is movies.
Based on true events or based on real stories. Let's get into it. So, my thing is it has to be at least accurate and it has to be, close to the events of what happened. And my ideal movie is 13 Hours, The Soldiers of Benghazi with John Krasinski.
Yep.
I think that paints a good picture of a true event on how raw and real the movie is. It was like seven soldiers or 8 soldiers against 90 other hostiles or whatever, and they had to go in there, get the senator out, which they quote unquote failed. But and then they did.
They failed the mission.
Yeah, but then it was pretty much their last stand against however many insurgents or however you guys call it.
Yeah, although they're probably saying the same about the soldiers. When they're insurgents, there are insurgents.
And so I think I believe it was 2 American soldiers that got killed by mortars. And somehow they finally got their backup and they got out of the hostile area and all this other stuff. But I mean, from timing to how, and then of course it's a Michael Bay movie, so it has to be flashy.
Well, lots of explosions
and things in that nature going on.
Optimus Prime did not show up.
No, he did not. Yeah. But I mean, it would have worked though. I think the next movie on my list would be American Gangster. With Denzel Washington.
Okay, see now that I've always wondered about though, because I know that movie, the script is based on like a newspaper article about the guy, the real life person that is modeled, Frank Lucas was modeled on. But I don't actually know that much about the actual historical events that influenced it.
Well, the true story of it is you had this quote unquote black gangster that was smuggling 100% pure heroin through the bodies of dead soldiers or the caskets of dead soldiers from Vietnam. Right. So he was going in Vietnam.
And that actually happened.
That actually happened.
Okay. And it was specifically I can't remember, is American Gangster in Chicago or New York?
Unless it was Harlem, so it has to be New York.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So there was an actual, essentially a Frank Lucas.
No, Frank Lucas is a real character.
Yeah, see, I mean, again, I knew that movie was based on a newspaper article about this sort of black mafioso type from the who challenged the Italian crime families in that region. But I've never knew what the full extent of that story was. That's actually really interesting though, that if you think of how odd some of the stuff is in that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my that was just about to say that was movies like that. It illustrates how sometimes we can do all we want. Anybody can do all they want to create a made-up story, but sometimes just the actual events being laid out, it's just unbelievable. American Gangster is a great example.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, it's not a great movie objectively, but speaking of Michael Bay, Pain and Gain.
Oh yeah.
One of my, it's about, it is Mark Wahlberg and The Rock.
Yeah.
And, but basically,
wait, that's a true story?
Yeah.
It's
all based on
that's another thing. Yeah, well, and during the movie, there are a few things, and I think it's one of the only creative I mean, I can't say he's not creative, Michael Bay. But one of the things that really tickled for me is that he snuck in that movie. He would put this actually happened.
Right.
And there's the one where he does it right before the guy's grill in the hand.
Yeah.
And it's just I mean, we lack creativity sometimes when in comparison to actuality.
Well, and I think too that goes into sometimes Hollywood takes these creative
artistic licenses.
Artistic licenses toward movies. And I think going back to what you were saying about the 13 hours. And I think also I was relating it to what was it? The movie where is it Lone Survivor?
That's another one.
And that's supposed to be but for instance, they're in the forest, and they're and they got us, they're coming out, and then every shot from the American soldiers is freaking pinpoint accuracy, you know, just like heads flying, you know, and like 60 bodies later, it's like an Arnold movie, but with the group. And like, so part of me is like, bro, like, there's no way they suck that bad at shooting back at you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, one of your guys got his hand injured, everyone else is dying. You're just like, what the, like, I don't know. So like, there's a point where I think there's like, it goes back to like, you know, the war stories, right? Like you wonder like what like the guys come back talking about 13 hours and they're like part of me is like, all right, I bet some of this happened, but like, bro, like did you really blow that car up? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and like you're trying to take the word for it, but I think like sometimes it gets embellished.
So, well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you got to take for granted. I think a good example of that, which, I mean, this is a fine movie, and I think we can highlight some of his pictures here because he's definitely pertinent to this subject. Have you seen Hacksaw Ridge?
Oh,
yeah, about the soldier that
the pacifist.
that didn't kill anybody.
Andrew Garfield played.
Yeah, I think he was
That was up
Pentecostal
for,
or
that was
something
up
like that.
for best picture, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a couple years ago it came out. Well, more than a couple, but and that's a true story. But the funny thing is, you can go online and like look at pictures of the actual battlefield compared to where they basically just blew everything. So like in the movie, he's like searching the field for wounded soldiers because they just like shelled the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And he ties them to the like any like what I'm not mechanically.
Hey,
but
what movie is that?
he ropes them down to the no, not that.
What's he doing? What's he doing to wounded soldiers? No.
But he ropes them down. Remember the wounded soldier in real life. It's like the actual like cliff was way smaller.
Oh yeah.
And so there's stuff like that, but Mel Gibson is like he kind of breaks it because his movies are like, I think every time he does a historical like a movie based on history, it's usually better than most. But he takes a lot of license himself.
Yes.
Braveheart is a perfect example. Everybody loves Braveheart, but like the most glaring fact is, and I'm not like, you know, super knowledgeable of history, but even I can know this, that at the time, okay, so Braveheart like is part of why like today people like it just was a huge like explosion in Scottish culture. Like everybody wanted to be a Scottish warrior. The real William Wallace and the Scottish people at that time didn't actually have kilts yet, and so kilts came out like around the Renaissance, as far as I know. And that movie is set like right in the heart of the, so they would have looked more like just, you know.
So this is
wearing
running around with the dick out.
So all the
running around with the dick out.
We gotta cover that. We need to miss something.
Well, that's how would how else would the viewer identify them with Scotland or anything like that? Because
I think the accents might help.
That kind of. But I mean, clearly, I think that was a marketing thing. It's like we're marketing this movie about like it's gonna. It's all about Scottish pride, patriotism, and we want stark contrast between English soldiers and Scottish warriors. And so we're going to make them look like the most caricatured version of a Scotsman, even though, it basically would be, I think I read somewhere where a historian put, it would basically be the equivalent of if somebody made a Civil War movie and they were wearing like Desert Storm fatigues.
But think about the movie like 300 to come to that. You know what I'm saying? It's based off of
and
like this.
Frank Miller,
no armor. Shirtless.
I mean that though I more see as like an artistic embellishment because Frank Miller, like he specifically in the graphic novel, I don't know if you've ever read it, but a lot of the characters are just nude. And it like they just have the helmets and they have the cape. And then that's it. And so in the movie, at least they have the leather, like, loincloth or whatever it is. And I very much see that as, like, that's an artistic expression on Frank Miller's part. Because I think he was trying to hone on, like, not just dicks, but specifically classical dicks.
Oh, classical dicks.
You know,
the classical D is always where you gotta have that. Yeah.
He's a classic
Okay, let's switch it up then. Like a true event movie like Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? Like a woman that's being, beaten and abused on a
Yeah.
regular basis, and then there are actual events in that movie that actually occurred
Yeah.
in her book that she wrote
Right.
based on her life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then same thing with like Purple Rain. Like it's not. It's obviously like over exaggerated on Prince's, upcoming and everything.
Yeah.
But there are like historical, or not historical, but actual true events of the movie that happened in
Yeah.
Prince's life.
Yeah.
That obviously inspired the movie.
Something that what you said reminded me of another musical biopic is
Bohemian Rhapsody.
no. I was thinking Straight Outta Compton.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And one thing that I always find interesting in movies that are true is that every once in a while, a line in the movie can give you like a little bit of clue as to who funded the movie.
yeah, that's true.
Because like
Absolutely.
as Chris knows, I love hip hop. NWA
Yep.
has been a band I've liked for a long time, and one thing I really enjoy about hip hop is how like you can find almost any tidbit of information about the industry or about certain people if you look at the lyrics close enough. And there's a part because famously Eric Eazy-E, when he died, he left his company to his wife, and according to a lot of artists, she's not great at managing the record. There's a scene in Straight Outta Compton where Eric's character, and I just had to be there by her, where he says something about you know the business inside and out, girl. Something like that, where it's just like don't know if Eazy-E said
So
that
what was
about
his
Yeah.
involvement in the film? Because I thought it was mostly Ice Cube
well,
who
Eazy-E
was.
has died.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, that's what I thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
His
I'm
involvement
wondering,
was-
it always made me wonder if she had some input on the writing.
Oh, like
Yeah.
she
had.
Like she
okay,
funded.
that's
I'm
right.
pretty
Yeah.
sure Ice
It's
Cube and
definitely-
Dr. Dre, like,
And
Yeah.
well,
Oh,
Death
yeah.
Row Records
Yeah.
had to have been, I'm sure, because that,
Yeah.
yeah, they had to have been involved, somewhere along.
When they sort of demonized the manager, I can't remember his name.
Well, to be fair,
The one that
Suge
Paul
Knight-
Giamatti
yeah,
plays.
yeah. Well, no,
No, the white man.
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Giamatti's character. I just don't remember his name, but
Jerry Law.
yeah.
I heard, I don't know if it's true, but I'm sure it is. I heard he actually died like 2 weeks of the movie being
Yeah,
released.
he did.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting too, because his daughter kind of cited how, and it is true, the way that he had their payments scheduled or their setup
Yeah.
is a lot like how the music industry operates today. They're called like 1080 contract or 1080p contracts, where basically it's like you're operated as a single entity, but that's neither here nor there. But
High
yeah,
definition.
she didn't love how he was portrayed either.
Well, and all I'm saying is like there's like it's hard like with Tina Turner and then like this it's like you're getting a perspective, you're getting a perspective from one side though, and like
Yeah.
it's sort of like there is not really a rebuttal, at least in some of these cases, where it's like okay, like well this is my experience, which is valid and true, but at the other point it's like I don't know everything like on the flip side either. It's sort of like a divorce. It's like there's two sides of the story, It's like
Well, I almost think that's
Yeah.
why it's kind of like, I don't know, if I were making a film based on historical event, depending on the context, I would almost want to not have, if people involved in the actual events were,
Yeah.
like if it was a contemporary event,
Yeah.
I would almost not want to work with them.
Right.
Because I feel like their bias would influence the, and
100%.
today though, that is, the opposite is more the trend. So
Yeah.
in the case like King Richard that just came out, I mean,
Yeah.
they, from what I understand, Venus and Serena had a lot of oversight
Oh, yeah.
in that. And again, that there's a few years when The Fighter came out with Christian Bale
Amazing
and
movie.
I forget the guy's name, but the actual fighter that it's based on, not the one Mark Wahlberg plays, but the one Christian Bale plays. That whole family was involved
Yeah.
in the and it became problematic for the director. I always forget his name. He talked about how it kind of became problematic as far as I know, because that was a family that had all these conflicts. I know the same is true for
What's that movie with Steve Carell? Fox.
Foxcatcher.
Yeah, and
yeah.
That wrestler notoriously did not
Yeah.
love.
because they portrayed Channing Tatum played him as kind of a dumb jock,
Yeah.
and That's a good movie though. I like
Yeah.
But that's just what
Steve
that's
Carell is so good.
yeah, that's an
So
incredible
good.
story.
I
Yeah.
just want to take this second to say Steve Carell's a fucking amazing actor.
Well, it's sort of like Jonah.
is.
It's
He's
sort of like
so
Jonah. It's sort of like Jonah Hill,
Yeah.
like where I was like, he's like, oh, you see this funny side, then all of a sudden you're like, what the hell? Like, where did
Yeah.
this very serious?
Especially in
Dramatic.
and this is another one of my favorite movies based on real events is and tying into him because he had a great performance in this was Big Short,
Oh yeah.
the 2008.
Object to the tits.
Yeah. Yeah. And, okay, now that's an example of a film where with Adam McKay, like it's obvious where he's taking liberties.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to be sure, I think there's some like a light political agenda to it.
Yeah.
It's
It's kind of preachy.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's still like I don't know. The whole Adam McKay is people either love him or hate him. I did not like his most recent one. Look Up, Don't Look Up. I did not like that,
Yeah.
but I want to see.
Everyone really wanted me to watch that movie.
Who did?
Everyone.
Oh,
Everyone
yeah.
wanted me to watch.
I haven't
it.
watched it.
I haven't
watched
yet.
it.
Not
It's like
You tell me what to do.
it's very divisive. Like
Yeah.
people either
Yeah.
really like it or like me. I don't want to get into it because it's not pertinent to the subject. But I
Yeah.
thought it was too on the nose. Like
We can table it.
yeah, we'll table that.
I
But
feel like they were reaching.
Table.
Just make
Yeah.
it.
They're reaching.
yeah,
But we're talking about movies that are reaching later.
yeah. We're gonna talk about that.
The footnotes.
But Adam McKay, Adam McKay is interesting because he does have comedic writing style, but like he's at a versatile array of.
Yeah,
I feel like.
he's definitely one of the like directors whose work I continue to look
Yeah.
forward to seeing. Even though, like I said, nothing he's done has like matched. I think the quality of The Big Short yet.
The writing. What I that one and for some reason Vice always stick in my head together. Maybe it's because obviously Christian Bale's in both.
Yeah, and I liked Vice a
I
lot.
really
Yes.
like Vice, and that speaking of movies that like the truth is crazier than like made up stuff sometimes. But with that one, what I liked about Vice is I felt like it actually really it made people actually research what happened during the Bush administration, and it really even our own father. I feel like
Yeah.
was forced
Yeah.
to really look at who's been a hardline Republican, you know, a lot of his
Yeah.
life. He's even at this point, he would even say he isn't super sure about a lot of the decisions that Mr. Bush made, which agreed.
Well, or didn't, like, like it was crazy that like a vice president could essentially like, and I don't think anyone knew that. I didn't know that level. Like I sort of was
It
like,
was
how the
nuts.
hell did this
Yeah.
happen? That Congress went to war.
And the amount of information that from that movie that's public information,
Yes.
right now.
Isn't that like, and I think that goes to show like how like our reality sometimes like we like that a movie's trying to deliver a certain like entertainment value and you wouldn't go if it wasn't entertaining.
Yeah.
You just watch the History Channel.
If
But,
Christian Bale
like-
hadn't gained 150 pounds,
Right.
no way I'm going to see it.
Exactly, and like I think just the realism, but also like delivering those lines of like those gems of like I think tickling the palate, or you know what I mean, like that someone wants to go out and be like, did that really fucking happen? Like, did that happen? And Cheney, like, just to say like that he essentially took the presidency from the president with his permission.
And and even after that,
Yeah.
Bush Sr. was forced to make a comment, essentially
Yeah.
saying, if we had known what Cheney was going to do, we never would have selected him for
Yeah.
his son. And it's like, that's on record, he said that. Somebody said that they wouldn't have picked somebody for their son to
Right,
work with,
it
and that
sucks.
shit is on record, and they ran the country,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, I don't know,
Right.
you did a good job.
You know what else? Which I wouldn't be surprised if this really happened. That opened my eyes. You know how they have like test groups, and they were test grouping
Yeah.
like terminology.
Yeah.
That was
Global warming, or
No,
like,
that's actually definitely.
and that's in like
that
I
goes
guess
on in the
in
private
everywhere.
sector
Yeah,
all the
like the
time,
market.
though.
And so just to think like our own politicians are doing marketing to the people,
Well, yeah, I mean,
like
that's
that. How
the-
real that is.
Just going off that, a good movie to watch in like next to that one is, have you ever seen W? Oliver Stone did
Oh,
it
yeah.
with Josh Brolin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are two films like I watched
That
kind
made
of
me
watched
feel
together.
bad. It honestly made me feel bad for George.
For George Bush?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was a more like intimate portrayal of him, obviously, than what.
I mean, he's a war criminal and fucking till the end of time. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, this isn't a political podcast. You can't defend anybody's fault. No. It's kind of interesting though. What I love about watching that movie and then watching Vice is like looking at just the different actors, different approaches. So you have
That's true.
Colin Powell is played by Tyler Perry in Vice, and then he's played by Edgar Wright Jeffrey Wright, in W, and you get two different, and then of course Christian Bale with pure like method acting portrayed Cheney in Vice, but then in W, the Cheney you get is the one played by oh god, I forgot his name, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss. And I remember, and when that came out, his performance as Cheney was lauded as like great. And then, so just an interesting coincidence. So like Cheney, him as Cheney kind of stole the spotlight in W.
Yeah.
And then for the moments that he was on screen, Sam Rockwell stole the spotlight as
George Bush.
Bush.
Sam
He's so good.
Yeah, and I thought he was impeccable as Bush. Like there was parts that I think were a little over the top. Like
campy.
Yeah, I think the portrayal of his alcoholism, which is well known, was probably a little like because they have a scene where he's like stumbling over at like a party in front of like world leaders. And I don't know for a fact, but I'm not sure.
There's no way a handler didn't get to him.
Exactly.
They got the secret surface area.
Like and then you look at W's portrayal, which both portray his alcoholism, but W I think has a more like subdued version, and it ultimately kind of homes in on like his wife being the one that was like, okay, you got to knock this off if you want to succeed. That actually, there's a couple things I've been wanting to mention, especially because we got on to Christian Bale, because that's, for me, that actually is where historical movie, I honestly could care less how accurate the movie is in its portrayal of history, because I think it exists on its own terms. And as long as and I have a whole thing about like, I actually like it when the movies are deliberate about that. So like, this is going into Tarantino, but what I'm obsessed with in Tarantino's last several films, excluding The Hateful Eight, if you take Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they're all historical movies in my sense. Like they're best understood in those terms.
But historical fiction.
Yes, exactly. But he is so deliberate about it that he can get away with it.
Yes.
So it's not like the case of my problem with Braveheart, which is that it hasn't like a dishonest portrayal of history, but it doesn't attempt to like address its dishonesty.
Yeah.
It just it's just like it's pure marketing. It's like we just said it happened this way. Whereas with Tarantino is like, okay, here's reality. We already know the story. Here's what I can do with it. And so like I think I mentioned this in the last episode, why it's like to me on the next level of like this is where filmmaking has to be. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think it's the greatest thing that it pulls off is it shows you history, it shows you Tarantino, and what he's doing is he's making the audience like we're often so confused that we think a film is meant to be a pure mirror to us, but what it actually is it's a reflection of our desires, and our desires don't match up with reality.
Right.
And so the movie has a very philosophical message in that sense, because it takes a historical event that is a tragedy by any means, and it turns it into this like fairy tale.
Yeah.
This literally a Once Upon a Time where there's a happy ending.
Yeah.
And the good guys win and the bad guys are killed in this glorious fashion.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing with Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah, where Hitler
it's
obliterated.
It doesn't, and like so many people like they're like I liked it until it veered away from reality. But I was like, that's the point.
Right.
Like it's not trying to subtly infiltrate reality and say this is actually what happened because we're just good.
Yeah.
It's deliberately telling you this is real life, but this is what a movie can do.
Yeah.
And I think at its highest form as an art, a movie isn't it's not a documentary. It's a reflection not of us, but of our desires, of our like what our highest value.
Yeah.
And so Yeah. So I was gonna save that for the end because that's. But setting that aside, one thing I want to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet, and this is really appropriate when we started talking about Christian Bale, method acting, his portrayal of Cheney, and just like I see him very much as like when moving into like replacing Daniel Day-Lewis. With the kind, he's not as selective, he's not as reclusive, but in terms of his method acting,
yes,
he is the closest to me as Daniel. And when it comes to historical films, to me, Daniel Day-Lewis is like Lincoln. For me, that's my favorite. That's me.
That and There Will Be Blood.
Yeah,
was based on.
That's not a true story though.
No,
that's
it's based on.
Yeah, and that's based on a novel by Upton Sinclair. But either way, like I very much view. And it's pure method acting. Daniel Day-Lewis, the way he got into role for Lincoln, is exactly what Christian Bale did with Cheney. Okay, so this is another question I wanted to ask. What are some? And I'll answer it first but think about what. This is a game I often play. What are some historical figures you'd like to see their life portrayed on film? And who would be the actor for it? So here's another one. Like at one point, it was talked about that Leo DiCaprio was attached to a Scorsese project and I would love to see this. That was going to be a biopic of Theodore Roosevelt. That to me would be Leo putting on stepping into his next actually starting to get into that top S tier level acting, where he's next to Day-Lewis, if he could pull that off. Yeah. Because that would be complete physical transformation. He has the especially as I'm watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and you see the weight gain he does. He's got the face for it. I would love to see him play a Theodore Roosevelt. I think that would be another Oscar for him.
I think one that already did it for me is Denzel Washington when he did Malcolm X.
I thought okay, and that's another one that I think is and with him, he doesn't have to do so much of he already looks a lot like Malcolm X. I think in just the body and everything, not just physically, but I think a lot of, if you watch his interviews and stuff like that, Malcolm X's old interviews, just his mannerisms.
Yeah.
Denzel already already, even in his interviews, Denzel already has that
make
presence.
the leap.
That is a good one. I figured that would come up at some point.
Yeah, I agree. Malcolm X was fantastic.
Bradley Cooper in American Sniper. I don't know that much about Chris Kyle, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty accurate to the book that he wrote. And from what Clint Eastwood explained was that the book wasn't so much about Chris Kyle, but it's about the soldiers that he fought with. And that's how the movie is that the movie is more or less about the soldiers that he fought with, all the stuff that he did for all the other soldiers and everything.
Yeah.
But it's still about Chris Kyle. But I like the way they intertwine between the two. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I feel like he took a moment. I felt like this shift happened. You had older war movies, right? They were very patriotic. U.S. wins and evil Germans die or Russians, whatever. And then there was this shift where it was horribly dark. Right, you get an apocalypse now, and in war, it's just
so that's
atrocious.
A reflection of the Vietnam era.
Right. Exactly. But then you shift in my mind to where you're talking about, where it's almost you're focusing on there's this interesting and cool and amazing and honorable aspect to it, but then there's this psychological devastation and effects on family and the interconnections of this positivity of having a brotherhood or a collective that really is working for a common goal, but how
Hurt Locker's the same way. I think what you're trying to get to is when it comes to anything post-Vietnam, you're dealing with very unpopular wars.
Yes.
And so, especially with Clint Eastwood, who is fairly conservative, he chooses, I think, cleverly, instead of focusing on war, focus on the soldier.
Yes.
Because he can make a movie that it's not an anti-war. It's an anti-war film, but it's not it's a soldier. It's like a love letter to the soldier, or a homage to that soldier. So it's not anti-war in the sense that it's not anti-America,
right?
But it's anti-war in,
I think, what it does to the person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now though is more like it's got that like it's just kind of like it has that base of war is horrible, but
Yeah.
it also I think
Yeah.
is making a direct statement on the America never needed to be in this country, whereas that's not coming out in
Correct.
American Sniper,
Right.
At least from my perspective.
No, I agree because I feel like he's avoiding it, but
Or even Hurt Locker. I didn't get that perspective.
who was the director in that? It was
Catherine Bigelow.
That's it. Yeah, I was like, I couldn't remember his Catherine.
Yeah.
But I did, and I like that because like I think sometimes it's like the forest in the trees, but like, I personally, I'm sure all of us know like vets that are affected very differently in different ways, and you can see like even like when they're out of the situation how it still affects them to this day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they come home a different person. I've heard from more than one people that I know personally, and like seeing that in the film and like how that can develop. Because I've never been in a war. I've never taken a life. Like I don't have that baseline. So to like see how that might develop, I think for me is very insightful in those movies. So for me, although it's based on history, it also is a study in the human psyche in some of those situations, and I think that's why I appreciate those more because, like you said, like I think documentaries gloss over that stuff. Like you're not looking at moral, compass. You're not looking at psychological effects.
Yeah.
You're just reporting. But those films are like kind of like this is the setup and how that develops.
Yeah, I think a documentary is like it tells us what we already know.
Correct.
And a film is like shows us our ambitions.
Yes.
Or the polar opposite of that. Like it gets into that domain of the unknown far more than a documentary can.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just lost it, but that made me think of another film that it was on that. Zero Dark 30. What is anybody seen that? Okay,
I'm trying to remember. I think I did. Is that the Bin Laden one?
Yeah, that's about. But as far as I know, I don't know a lot about the last like chunk of it where it actually depicts SEAL Team 6 going in and like it raiding his house in Pakistan. All that is badass, like perfectly shot. And that's another movie. I think Catherine Bigelow did that as well. Yeah, she did both. She did Hurt Locker.
I was pretty
and
sure.
then her follow-up to Hurt Locker was Zero Dark 30. But as far as I know, from what I've read, the way the movie depicts like who's the Jessica Chastain as like this rogue operative who's like the only one in the entire department and the entire American intelligence military apparatus driving forward this idea of we're gonna find him here and that's from what I have been told not true.
There's no.
I mean, it was like
There's no.
yeah, but that's still a good film. I mean, have you seen, going back to Spielberg, who, again, when it comes to just straight, like, copy and paste, this is history, and he almost, like, Spielberg almost is the middle ground between, like I said, like an Inglourious Bastards and a Braveheart, where Spielberg does embellishments, but he's, like, still, it's not like he's trying to just infiltrate it with, like, it's just convenient to do that. It's like he's still maximizing on the potential of film to make a broader abstract like message than just be a straight up depiction of history. For me, like, I mean, again, Saving Private Ryan is, I mean, that movie, that movie is like the most, if you don't feel some patriotism when you watch, I don't care what part of the spectrum you're on, if you don't watch, and by the end just kind of like with the American flag and everything, come on. I mean, you gotta be a cynical bastard not to kind of get that. Schindler's List, I have mixed feelings about. I think it, as a Holocaust film, it's a good film, but I think there are better Holocaust films.
Because that's such a great event. Do you mean worse Holocaust films?
Yeah.
Jackass.
Well, the pianist.
With that being said, we're gonna shut it down there. Oh man, I'm James Tucker with the Socialist Productions Movie Reviews. Chris, Eric, Dallas. We'll see you guys next episode. I haven't come up with the topic yet, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
So
We'll figure it out.
see you guys next time.